Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Dan. Recently, I have finished The Dragon Republic by RFKuang, which is also the second book of the Poppy War trilogy. I really like this book. Like in the Poppy War reference video I did earlier, in this video I will try to talk about all the historical references of the Dragon Republic, how RFKuang has adopted what had happened in history and integrated it in her fantasy book. This video, inevitably, I will talk about what had happened in the Dragon Republic, so if you haven't checked that book out and want the first-hand reading experience, I would recommend you to finish the book first and come back later. If you don't mind or if you have finished the book already, then congratulations, you can keep on watching it. Before I chat about all the historical references in the second book, let's briefly recap what had happened in this trilogy so far. The first book is The Poppy War, which is a dark fantasy novel inspired by Chinese history and mythology. Our main character is called Rin, who is a war orphan from a rural village, and she didn't want to marry this old guy arranged by her foster family, so she studied very hard for the national exam. Luckily, she gains admission to a military school, a really famous one called Sign Guard. In here, she's gonna meet different students coming from the wealthier provinces and have classes with different tutors. She also discovered she had a special power in her body, making her a shaman. Unfortunately, with the invasion of the Federation, this group of students, including Rin, needs to move to the front line and help defending the Nikara Empire. None of them would expect there's gonna be more about this invasion and they're gonna witness the horror of war. Coming to the second book, The Dragon Republic, Rin and her Seeker, the assassin group, was wanted by the empress. Fasra, the warlord of the Dragon Province, got a greater vision to overthrow this corrupted empire and set up a republic. Seeing both of them share the same purpose to take down the empress, Rin decided to join this Dragon Republic. This Dragon Republic was also working with another country which is called the Hesperian, hoping that this joint force can take down the empire and set up a more democratic republic. This novel gonna discuss subjects like loyalty, power, and the cost of revenge, set against a backdrop of intense political and military struggle. Some of you may have read this book long time ago when this book was first published, and I hope that this brief summary can woke your memory up, and now we can discuss all the historical references in the Dragon Republic. First of all, let's chat about when does this event take place in history. From the Dragon Republic, there is still an empire but with 12 provinces, and even one of them is setting up a republic. In history, we know that this whole series was inspired by the Qing dynasty, aka the last dynasty in Chinese history. With the two Opium Wars and also the First Sino-Japanese War, the ruling of the Qing government has been declining. Imagine the consequences of war, and also they have to sign different treaties which would greatly impact the economy of the Qing government. Socially, there were problems like opium addiction and also uprising, like the Taiping Uprising and Boxer Rebellion. And before, there were some not so successful reforms that aimed to strengthen the country. At that time, China has been sending students to study abroad, so the younger generation would be influenced by Western ideas like democracy and science, which are the concepts that are not developed yet at that time of China. Seeing how corrupted and weak this Qing government is, Sun Yat-sen led the 1911 revolution, marking the end of the 2,000-year empire system in China, and set up the very first republic in China. The first president is Yuan Shikai in 1912. You may think it's gonna be like a happy ending because we finally overthrow the empire and set up a republic, life should be easier. But it is not. Unfortunately, Yuan Shikai died so early in 1916. What makes it worse is the reforms that the Qing government carried out earlier. It grants the local warlords with more power. The warlords seized the chance of this political and social instability. With foreign powers sponsoring them, they started to claim and divide the territories of China. So learning this part of history, you may wonder how does it connect to the Dragon Republic? I think RFKuang didn't directly borrow this part of history but modifying it. In the book, we have the 12 warlord system, which should be happen later in history, and also we still got the empress, which should be overthrown already, until the Dragon Province decide to set up a republic and overthrow this Nikara Empire. Then you may be thinking, when does this warlord system gonna be failed in history? In history, it was Kuang, which was the political party setting up the Republic of China, working with the Communist Party to unify China, defeating other warlords. In the Dragon Republic, it was nearly the ending for me. I finally realized Naja, this character, is representing the leader of Kuang, because Naja is from the Republic. Then Rin is the one opposing him. So putting her in the historical context, making her the leader of the Communist Party, Chairperson Mao. The Dragon Province start the expedition to defeat the northern warlords which are supporting the empress. At this point, Rin and Naja, these two characters, are working together. Just like in history, Communist Party and the Kuomintang working together to unify China. Up to the end of the Dragon Republic, there is no one unifying the Nicara Empire, and I guess this part will be left to the last book of the trilogy, The Burning God. By the end of the Dragon Republic, I know that the next book gonna be inspired by the Chinese Civil War when the Kuomintang is fighting against the Communist Party. The Burning God obviously is gonna be inspired by this part of history, and I guess it will be better for me to cover it in the next video because it's gonna be another long story. Speaking of the Dragon Province, the ruler, the warlord of it, Fasra, is the first character to bring in the concept of democracy to Nicara Empire. His wife has been sent to Hesperia to study about it. In the 19th century, similar things has happened in China. Firstly, like in the book, there were missionaries coming to China. Other than spreading the words from the God, they also bring in the Western way of thinking and culture. They also set up school in Beijing and Shanghai where Western way of teaching was adopted. This involves the concepts like science and democracy, which were not studied and developed yet at that time. Then some students will be sent to study abroad. When they finish their study, they will bring in what they have learned and push the modernization of China. If you remember from the last video, Japan went through the Meiji Restoration in the late 19th century by adopting modernized ideas and production methods, which transformed Japan into a superpower. China also sent some students to Japan, and in return they have learned some Western ideas from them. So when these students come back, they will start publishing journals and papers to spread about all these new fancy ideas they have just learned. Let's say Le Jeunesse, forgive my French, was first published in 1915. There would be discussion about these Western concepts like free will, not being conservative, don't lock yourself in a country, and be scientific. We also have two very interesting persons, Mr. De and Mr. Sai. They are actually the shortening for democracy, Mr. De, and Mr. Science, Mr. Sai. And then we also have a very important person which I briefly mentioned earlier, Sun Yat-sen, who led the 1911 revolution, who had actually studied abroad before. Then China joined two expos, one in Paris in 1876 and one in San Francisco in 1876. Seeing how big this world actually was, China also wanted to develop this kind of technology. From 1861 to 1894, China went through the self-strengthening movement. They bought in quite a lot of modern weapons and warships. This part does reminds me of what Fasra has done to his navy. The Dragon Republic got advanced weapons and modern warships from the Hesperian. From all of this, we can see the effort China has put in the 19th century to become modernized. Just like Fasra in the Dragon Republic, many passionate students returning to China and promote the Western way of thinking, which paved the way for overthrowing the empire and setting up a republic later. Speaking of difference between China and the West, I guess we should talk about the Nicara Empire and Hesperia. From the eyes of the Nicara, the Hesperian is always taller, much bigger, drinking milk, not showering, and looking pale. And from Hesperia, Nicara, this empire is barbarian, inferior, and treated them as study subject. In history, I would say there would be the same conception between China and the West. Earlier, I mentioned that there would be missionaries coming to China and spread the word of God and Christianism. Even though they come as neutral, they would see the practice of China at that time as outdated and superstitious. For Westerners coming to China, they would see the living style at that time was not as civilized as the West. At that time, Chinese men can still marry more than one wife. Women has to bind their foot because they think it is attractive. And there is a saying, 3-inch golden lotus. You can imagine how deformed the foot of an adult woman gonna be because of this 3-inch beauty standard. Then the Western media will portray Asian as greedy, as tricky. In the 2 opium wars I talked about in the last video, the West would see as a way to teach the corrupted Qing government a lesson, how civilized and modernized a state should be. Then China has to sign different treaties because of losing wars. Different to the book, Basra did win the war against the empire with the help of Hesperia. In return, Basra has to sign different agreements and treaties with them. Hesperia can send missionaries, can set up military base wherever they want, they can trade without paying the tariff. In short, Basra dreams come true, setting up a dream republic, or should I say winning a throne. But he is just another puppet ruler from the Hesperian. I have talked about this in the last time, so I will just briefly talk about how this is gonna relate to history. After losing the First Opium War, China has to sign the Treaty of Nanking in 1842. Losing the war, China has to cede Hong Kong to Britain, open up 5 ports for British trades and residents. British citizens in these ports were granted extraterritorial rights, meaning that they are subjected to British laws, but not Chinese. China agreed to pay indemnity for 21 million silver dollars to the UK for war expense and the destructions of opium. The treaty granted the UK most favored nation status, ensuring that any future concession made by China to other foreign powers would also apply to Britain. This treaty is always regarded as unequal and considered as century of humiliation. On topics I have mentioned previously, we also see how the survivor of the pleasure house gonna live in the Dragon Republic. In the last book, Vanka was taken to the pleasure house and was sexually abused. Luckily, she escaped from it. In this book, she's trying to live her own life. She even has to do her own abortion because of the disapproval from the Hesperian religion. Even though she tried to move on from what had happened, which was tragic, people around her still see her as a victim and often regarded her as a broken person. This part I did cover in the last video, and we know that the inspiration of the pleasure house is the comfort woman in real life. Because of historical context and the belief of Confucianism, sexual intercourse before marriage was not well accepted, so the survivor of the comfort woman was left alone in society. In the Dragon Republic, this part happened quite early. When Rin met the empress for the first time, Daji did explain what had happened in the First Poppy War. This part I did cover in the last video, but let's do it again. Lushan, this place in the Nicara Empire, is actually the old summer palace in Beijing. They both suffer from the looting from the foreign powers and burned this beautiful place down. In the book, Daji rebuilt Lushan to remind people what had happened in the war. But in real life, the old summer palace is still laid in ruin. Many of the treasures are still lost, and you can see the pieces left because of the war. Speaking of the empress, the god she connected to is called Nuwa, which is also a character from Chinese myth and folk story. She is a mother goddess and also a member of 3 sovereigns of Chinese mythology. She is described as having human upper body but snake lower body. There are 2 very well-known stories about her. The first one is she creating human by using yellow clay. The second one is about the 4 pillars supporting the sky suddenly collapse, causing a big hole in the sky. Nuwa pity human, so she firstly gathered 5 color stones to patch up the hole in the sky. Then she killed a tortoise and used its 4 legs to support the sky again. At last, she cleared all the mess and let the human live happily forever. After talking about this mythical goddess called Nuwa, now let's move on to a period of time that the Dragon Republic briefly mentioned, which is about the Chinese philosophy and governance. It is the era of warring states in Chinese history, which is about 475 BC to 221 BC. Warring states, literally, like its name, various rival Chinese states battle viciously for territorial advantage and dominance. We have 7 well-known states in total: Qin, Han, Wei, Zhao, Qi, Zhu, Yan. So imagine 3 centuries of war, the instability and the suffering it can bring. so it pushed the thinkers to seek solutions for restoring orders and harmony in society, also seeking new ideas and strategies to achieve effective governance, social cohesion, and ethical conduct. So these thinkers, this philosopher will travel court offering their counsel and teaching. The rulers then can adopt those that can benefit them the most. Without any central authority, these thinkers can freely express their opinions, their ideas. Famously, we have Confucianism's emphasis on moral virtues, proper conduct, and the importance of social harmony and hierarchical relationships. In the Dragon Republic, Manzi, this philosopher, is a Confucianist. Also, we have Taoism, which we covered in the last video. It emphasized living in harmony with the Tao, the way, advocating simplicity, spontaneity, and non-interference with the natural order. In total, this era fostered 10 different kinds of philosophy. In the book, we have this story between Fu Chai and Guozian, which took place before this era. It happened in the spring and autumn period, which is approximately 771 BC to 476 BC. Fu Chai was an ambitious king from a place called Wu. Guozian was also a king from a kingdom called Yue. Unlike Wu, Yue, this kingdom was actually quite weak, so Yue, this kingdom was easily defeated by Wu. Guozian, this king from Yue, was captured and served as a slave. During this period, Guozian endured severe humiliation and hard labor, all while secretly plotting his revenge. He would sleep on straw and taste a bitter bladder to remind him all the humiliation he has gone through. After several years, Guozian was released to Yue because Fu Chai didn't see him as a threat anymore. But Guozian has been plotting his revenge and successfully defeated Wu later. The story of Guozian is often celebrated as a tale of perseverance, resilience, and the ultimate triumph of the underdog. His ability to endure hardship, maintain strategic patience, and exact revenge has been a source of inspiration in Chinese culture. So here are possibly all the historical references in the Dragon Republic. You can see how RFKuang has integrated her research into a fantasy world, but it still makes sense. And this is also the reason why I love this series so much. I will definitely check out the Burning God, which is also the last book of this series, next month, meaning that I will probably do a final reference soon. So if you've enjoyed today's video, don't forget to give it a like. If you don't want to miss any content from me, make sure you have subscribed to my channel. I'll see you real soon. Goodbye!